Hello, everybody, and welcome to the June 18th Trips and Traps. I'm Andy Serling, joined by Richard Migliore.
Yeah, kind of a light race card to pick from. We've only got 3 races, but I thought the turf race was particularly interesting, the poker.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting to look at the dynamics and talk about some good horses where they'll be going forward. We'll start out with a race, and it's kind of the theme that we cover fairly frequently, and it's how does the break affect a race? And particularly in this case with the 3 Promise and Hope, Richie wants to talk about this horse just not straight in the gate.
Yeah, just look at the way his legs are. He's off center. His hind leg is more cocked to his left, and he's going to break a little slow. His head was slightly turned, and now he gets off a step slow. He's got a set, and then he just gets crunched. And, I know a lot of people say, well, why didn't they straighten him up more? Sometimes when a horse is bad in the gate, you can't straighten him up too much because they'll blow up. So you take what you can get.
Yeah, no, it's a difficult situation. The other thing is, we talk about this, and you can see it in the pan. You see him bobble after the start also because he gets slammed. The bottom line is the door's going to close pretty quickly. And listen, when you were riding, when a guy broke slowly inside of you, especially if you knew he was a contender and you can legally close the door, you close the door.
Well, and I think it's even compounded nowadays because nobody's held accountable for their actions leaving the starting gate. So back in the day, yeah, if you could take an edge, you would. But right now, it's basically a free-for-all out of the gate.
No, they have created that situation. Now, Promise and Hope finds himself well back in the field, and you see him moving into about 6th on the outside. But the interesting thing is not just that he was compromised. If you look at the chart of this race, it was a merry-go-round race in front of him. The horses that are 1, 2, 3, 4 run 1, 2, 3, 4 around the racetrack. And I'm also a little interested in your thoughts while we're talking about it on the one horse, LaFleur County. I thought that Javier kind of overcommitted to the inside a little here.
Yeah, but I think the horse kind of forced his hand. The horse dragged him up into the spot, and Javier's been riding so well. I really think that if he had an opportunity, he would have tried to give himself another option, but the horse dragged him up into that spot. Now he's basically committed because he's hooked on heels. I agree. I think he should have been a lot closer. I don't think he was ever comfortable there, but I think that was a case where the horse hurt the rider's ideas.
Maybe he's a bit of a lug-in horse. He's almost riding right in the rail. Meanwhile, Promise and Hope is sort of back in 5th. Promise and Hope fit very well in this race. He was dropping down maiden special and maiden claimer first time out, and I just feel like he's the kind of horse that people are going to look at it and they're going to say, you know what, he had his chance. He's just not very good. But to me, he lost any chance he had at the break.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think he made a long, sustained run. It was subtle, but he made a long, sustained run, and the pace was soft. 23, 46, and 4, going 6 furlongs. They came home in 12 and a fifth or 12 and 2. That's running on the dirt for these kind of horses. I think his race was sneaky good.
Yeah, I agree. I'm looking forward to getting Promise and Hope one more chance against maiden claimers. We'll turn our attention to Saturday's card, and we'll look at the 5th race, and that was the poker. A very interesting race that ended up having a very, very slow pace.
Well, you couldn't anticipate the pace would be this slow. Now, I'll give Jose Ortiz credit. He came out with intention. He rode King Crease, the eventual winner, out of the gate and basically threw down the gauntlet. Like, okay, guys, this is what I'm doing. Now you figure it out. Now he's got the other speed, or the main speed, in my estimation, heart-to-heart to his outside. Keep an eye on Luis Saez's body language as he's intent on taking this horse back, and the horse isn't really a willing participant in that.
No, this is a horse that he's just flat-out faster than King Crease early, and he is supposed to have come out with the intention and say to Jose, oh, you think you've got speed? Try to run with my speed. And if they speed away from the field, that's another thing. But I don't think that would have happened. And you can see how slowly they're going because a horse who's not that fast, a horse outside of him in this race, how great. He's even being restrained by the rider. And everybody, and particularly long on value back there, you see him steadying back behind horses. Il Campione, the 6 horse, he is completely caught towards the outside, and he has an uncovered wide trip the whole way. I thought he ran very well.
I actually think he ran best of all. I think he was caught wide every step of the way. It's very difficult to be wide the entire turn in a turf race, and then when they finished as fast as they did, because they only went 47 and 3, a horse like King Crease, who's class, he's got quality, he's going to be hard for anybody to run down under these circumstances.
No, they go 45 and 4. He does on the front end with a length and a half, 2-length lead. He turned this into a half-mile sprint to the wire with a length advantage. You're not going to beat him in that situation. And considering that Il Campione is completely hung out to dry, long on value we'll talk about in the middle, there's Heart to Heart, who had no chance trying to rate behind a slow pace. His weapon is his speed, and they took it away from him at the start.
Well, maybe he wouldn't have run well anyway.
No.
But I agree with you.
No chance.
If he had any opportunity, if you have any chance, sense. You've got to dictate the running, and they basically forfeited that right off the break.
I would never care if you want your horses to win or run well, but I wouldn't lose any sleep as a trainer, an owner, a rider if the horse didn't run well, if you did the right thing. But they don't know what Heart to Heart could have done if he had used his speed to his advantage. It probably helps Il Campione because it spreads the field out because he really ran a winning race.
Well, yeah, because it's going to give him options. It might give him an opportunity to duck in. You wanted to talk about long on value. I think he was bottled up. He did encounter traffic. I just didn't see a huge amount of run from him when he got clear.
I agree with you. I would like to have seen something from him when you consider he's supposed to have some run at the end. On the other hand, I do wonder if it was a faster pace how well he would have done. But I agree. It feels like he has not gotten that Florida form back.
No, and again, I'll give him credit because they were finishing, but you didn't see any kind of real pop from him when he did finally work out to the clear. And if he had come running and finished a little bit closer, let's say he was fourth, you would have said, well, yeah, he had a tough trip. I'm not buying it with this, in a turf race, horses have the ability to accelerate.
And the other thing is, even if it had been a faster pace and he had won or run well, you would have said he got a perfect trip and be against him. I mean, you look at Vijak, who I thought Junior did a very good job dealing with the hand he was dealt, saving ground, the two-path, and angling out. He ran a good race, and he was compromised by pace, but I still don't think anyone ran better than Il Campione.
No, Il Campione's a horse I want out of this race. I think he's a horse that also possesses more speed that they chose not to use for whatever reason. Although we've said this, I'd rather tease. If he has his choice, he'd rather rate. My question to you about Vijak, and I agree about the ride, and he did finish, is it that the surface made a big difference, or he's back to the distance he really wants?
I think the surface was fine. I think he handled the surface,
right.
But I think you're right. I think a one-turn mile, one-turn 7 furlongs is what he needs, and this is problematic heading towards Saratoga because he's got to go 2 turns, and I don't think his run will be as effective in the 4-star Dave. We'll probably get a chance to find out.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think he's made for one-turn races, and I think the surface to him was all the same. He ran his race.
I agree. He showed he can handle the surfaces. Yeah. He needs the right situation. We've got one more race to show, and this was a maiden race that was run on Sunday, the 4th race. And we're going to talk about a whole lot of horses here, and some horses, particularly Captain Tim at the start, you see in those familiar Zenyatta silks getting left the start, and I know Richie wants to say more about that in a second. We're going to talk about the 1 who gets traffic in the stretch, the 5 who gets forced because Erod is right to go early into a slow pace, but he just ends up in an uncomfortable spot. And once again, Arbitrator, a horse we've talked about before, he gets buried down on the inside.
And just never comfortable, just never where he could use his stride. Getting back to Captain Tim quickly, he had broken through the gate before the start. A lot of times the horse is really keyed up, ready to break. All that energy is coiled up in him. They break through the gate, and it's like the air coming out of the balloon, and then they just don't respond as well the second time. He ran remarkable considering him breaking through the gate and then getting off slowly and having to work out a trip. And again, Junior Alvarado doing a very good job with a bad hand.
Yeah, he got dealt a bad hand, and he ends up getting to settle in a nice spot. The 5 horse, Erod is right. The pace is slow early, and he sends him early, and he gets him down in position on the inside. The problem is now his position is established, and they speed it up, not surprisingly, the second quarter. And I don't think he imagined being down on the inside fighting for the lead as the best spot to be in. He got dealt a bad hand because he actually did the right thing.
Yeah, and there comes a point where there's no return. You are committed. You can't take back at a certain point of the race and expect that you're going to come on. Maybe in a turf race you could, but in a race like this, he's got his position. He can't forfeit that position.
No, there's nothing you can do about it. Now, I think if the 7 Kabang, if Luis Saez had taken more advantage of his speed, he clears off in the first quarter, and it's a different run race because this race is essentially run like a bottled-up turf race.
Well, and if you go on the first 1/8 of a mile, guys will adjust around you, and now you're not stuck in between horses, an uncomfortable position, using more energy with horses surrounding you than if you had gone forward and spread the field out and got basically just comfortable.
Right. Now the 5 is once again the inside. The 3 Arbitrator in green can't get out. Junior's doing a great job with Captain Tim keeping him in. The 1 horse who's behind all of these, and that's River Date, another horse who's going to be crying for room in the stretch. The same with the 3 Arbitrator.
You know, as we were watching it a couple times as we were setting up for the show, I still believe in my heart Captain Tim was the best horse.
I agree.
But I think River Date actually had less of a comfortable time where Arbitrator didn't really accelerate, and he's pecking and poking for spots. But right here you can see where River Date runs out of room, and Kendrick Carmouche has basically got to put up the white flag and say, well, I ran out of time. I'm getting in a tough spot. basically I got to give up.
Well, it's actually interesting watching it because Junior is keeping Arbitrator in towards his inside, and he's holding his position, and he's race riding. And then he's got the one behind him, and he's got Javier on the outside, and Javier does a good job keeping him in. And the two of them, they prevent River Date from getting room. They've already sawed off Arbitrator. There was a lot of very good and completely legal race riding going on here.
Well, I think that's a great illustration of what you're saying when you talk about good, hard, clean race riding as opposed to seeing a horse moving you outside and angling your horse out into them. This was basically keeping horses bottled up in their lanes without taking their ground.
Absolutely. This was strategic riding, making your move at the right time and doing it in a way that helped your horse, and it also prevented other horses. I thought this was a very interesting race.
Yeah, and you know what's interesting about it, too, is that a lot of times when guys get in the stretch, they'll kind of lose sight of that. They forget about everything else. They're just riding to go forward. Only your very best riders still have the presence of mind to realize who's around them and who they need to keep where. I thought this was a great illustration of it.
No, I thought there was some excellent race riding in here, and as you say, all legal. Well, once again, we can always use your help on Trips and Traps. It's Trips and Traps at NYRank.com.